In this video, I'm going to be looking at how we export objects that we've made in Maya with textures into Unity. You're going to have to follow a few steps here to make sure that we do it the correct way. And doing it this way will ensure that if you've textured your object, whether that's with a UV map or with tiled textures or with simple color shading in Maya, it will all go with your model. And it's a nice neat way of keeping all of your assets that you create in Maya nicely grouped together with their accompanying materials for your scenes in Unity. If you had a go at exporting from Maya using the OBJ export method, what you'll be finding, or if you've tried to even open your scene, your Maya scene inside Unity, you might find that you've lost your textures. This will be because you haven't set your project at the start of the session and haven't saved your textures in the source images folder. It's quite an easy thing to do and it's quite an easy mistake to make, so don't be disheartened if you've had a go at this and tried to import your models into Unity and not seen any of the textures. Doing it this way will mean that we can avoid that. Before you do that, you need to just do a final few checks with your model. So this is a very simple crate I made in a previous tutorial, and I created a UV map and applied a basic crate texture onto my my cube. So there's my UV map, which I made in Photoshop. What I want to do is make sure that this goes to Unity the correct size, will sit nicely on the terrain, and will have the accompanying textures. So in order to do that, we need to do a few things first. So what I'm going to do is make sure that we're working in the right units. So if you go to Windows, Settings and Preferences, and then Preferences, you can make sure that on the Settings tab you're working in meters. So you can see here I was working in centimeters. So if I flip that to meters and hit save, what's going to happen is that my cube is tiny. So you see each one of these squares is a meter squared. I need to resize this so it's the right size. So it's about 1.5, 1 meters in size. So it will be the right size when we import it into Unity. So remember, 1 unit in Maya now is the same as in Unity. So it's the equivalent of 1 meter. Okay, so that's about the right size. It's a lot larger. The other thing we need to do is sit this on the grid in a way that will work in Unity. So at the minute, if we were to export this, it would be floating halfway through the floor in Unity. So what we need to do is move this. If your sort of model's all over the place, it's over here. We need to make sure that it's in the center of the grid to begin with. So you can use your snap to grid if you want, or if you hold down X, it will do the same thing. So when you move now, you can snap it to the very center. Okay, if you've got your model over here and I don't know, you've been modeling away and your pivot point is a mess and it's not in the center of the object, what you need to do is go to Modify, Center Pivot, okay, and then do the same thing, snap it to grid and move it to the middle. Okay, what we need to do is come to side view now, and I'll just turn on my material so we can see it. And we need to move it up so it sits on the floor of Unity. Again, if you want to be really spot on with this, if you go to snap to point, hold down D, snap your pivot to the bottom, and then we can move it up and it sits perfectly on the floor. We just need to reset the pivot point now so it's in the middle. So if we go to center pivot, okay, so our object is right in the middle of Maya and it's sat perfectly on the grid on the floor. But what we need to do is move the pivot point now so it's at the bottom, so it's right in the center of Maya. So what you need to do for this is make sure it's selected, go to freeze transformations, and then go to reset transformations. And what we have now is an object that is perfectly in the middle of Maya, and the pivot point is right at the bottom center of our object. This will save you a lot of time when you're working in Unity, as the transformations now will be working from the bottom point of your object, and when you come to snapping things to the terrain, you won't have any issues. Okay, nice. So this is ready to export now, and what we need to do is just check that we have the plugin that we need to export it. So I'm going to export this as an FBX file, and if you go up to Windows, Settings and Preferences, Plugin Manager, you need to just make sure that the FBX option is available to you. So if I go to File, Export Selection, you'll see that I have the option to export as an FBX file. If that's not there, this is what you need to do. You go to Windows, Settings and Preferences, Plugin Manager, and then you need to scroll down, it's right towards the bottom, and make sure that FBX Maya is ticked. So we've got loaded and auto load. So make sure that that is ticked, and that will appear. Okay. Best thing to do before you export it is go to Edit, Delete by Type, History. Okay, nice and clean model ready to export. Really important that you do that. So Edit, Delete by Type, and History. And then we go to File, Export Selection. So it would be best to select the thing that you want to export and then Export Selection. If you've got a big scene in here with lights, different objects, and you want to export the whole thing, you can do that. You would just do Export All, or you could select everything and do Export Selection. But let's say you've been working away on this and you've forgotten that you've left something in the scene and you do Export All, you might find that you'll have exported something that you didn't want. Before I export it, I'm just going to check that it's labeled neatly for programming purposes. So I'm going to go to Windows Outliner, and at the minute it's called PCube1. So what I'll do is just call this crate 1. That way you are going to keep it nice and neat when it comes to your programming in Unity. Also, you might want to label the materials as well, making sure that you've labeled your textures or materials. So I'll just call it crate 1, 2. Or crate 2, sorry, because I've already got a crate 1 in there. Okay, so let's just do that one more time, delete history. And now we go to File, Export Selection, and I'm going to save it in my Assets folder. So you might want to save this in the Assets folder of your Unity file. You might want to save it in a dedicated folder that's for your project or for your environment. But for now, I'm just going to save it in the project assets. So you see I've already had a go at doing this once, so I'll just call this crate 2 and do export selection. But before I do that, just make sure that you have ticked a few things on here. So go to include, where is it? Just open these all up. Yeah, this one. So where it says embed media, you need to make sure that that is ticked. If you don't tick that, it won't bring along the textures. So make sure you import the embedded media. You can import lights here if you want, cameras, geometry, obviously, because that is our object. But that is all we need to do. And we hit export selection. So that will create, if we go to John My Work, which is where we're at, and then assets, you can see these are this is the last one I just created, so crate 2. Okay, so let's jump to Unity and see this in action. So at the minute, I've just got a basic terrain here with a first person controller in there to test this, and I'm going to import my cube. So lots of ways you can do this. You can navigate it to your folder. If you've got it in your assets folder, you can just drag it in, or if you go to assets, import new asset, and then I've just jumped to the folder of where it's at, import crate 2, and there you go. You'll see that because we made that FBX file, it's got the texture with it. So we can just drag this in now. Beauty of beauty. Sounded proper Leicester then. The beauty of resetting those transformations, you can see that it's perfectly snapped to the floor when we import it, so it's sitting perfectly on our terrain. We know that there's no issue with textures overlapping or anything like that. And the good thing is, if we want to move this and make adjustments to it, those transformations are all working nice and neatly. So that is a really nice, neat asset there, ready to be placed where we need it. Let's hit play, see if it's the right scale. So again, you can see that that is the right scale. So it's about 1 meter, 1.2 meters in height, something like that. So we can interact with that object in the correct way. We're not having to rescale it in Unity and do anything there. So all the transformations and scaling options will be nice and neat as well. Obviously I can run through this because it doesn't have a collider on it. To change that, you want to just be adding your mesh collider to that to make sure that we don't run through it. But that is exporting from Maya using the FBX file type and making sure that your textures go along with it, and that we've got our object the right scale and it's sat perfectly on the terrain. So have a go at that, folks. Stick to those methods and enjoy.